Welcome to Living Astrology with host Janet Hickok, intuitive astrologer and human design consultant, and her co-host Jason Levanis, intuitive tarot card reader and teacher, as well as feng shui consultant. At Living Astrology Radio, we are committed to empowering people to reach for the stars. Now enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of Living Astrology, where we are beginning the day in the shadow of another Mercury retrograde. Just when you think you're done, here he comes again. The little trickster comes back to haunt us. And so I'm sitting here today. Well, I'm not really sitting here with him, but my co-host today, Jason Levanis, is my mirror image on the east coast of the United States. Hello, Jason.
Good evening, Blue-Eyed Goddess. How the heck are ya?
I'm doing well, thank you, considering there's little irritations all over, but I'm living through them.
We have an excellent show planned for everyone.
We do at that.
We have a lot of people in the queue. I'm excited.
I see them. I'm waving at all of you in the queue. You can't see me doing that. In fact, today I was trying to figure out how could we blend radio and video. I haven't figured that one out yet, and I do not want to test that out during a Mercury retrograde. But perhaps after the first of the year, I will have figured out how that could be possible, and we can simulcast somehow in video and broadcast live on the radio. So some of you tech heads and nerds out there, let me know if you have any great brainy ideas. How are you, Jason?
Does that mean I have to look pretty?
Uh-huh. At least pretty decent.
So it's very apropos because Mercury was the major symbology represented in the tarot, as you know, this week from the show. And so I think it's very interesting that our shows are completely symbiotic. Today's Mercury in retrograde in Capricorn. Gosh, do I even want to know? Is it like if you had to rate retrogrades, like one being whatever, a little setback, kind of annoying, 10 being I want to purchase a flamethrower, I'm so frustrated. Where would you peg this one at?
Well, because I'm a Gemini and Mercury is my ruling planet, I would have to peg the 10 on Mercury. But you see, Mercury, it gets kind of a bad rap because it really isn't all bad. And so when we start talking today about Mercury and in specific its retrograde in Capricorn, hopefully everybody's going to see that it's not so much that Mercury causes trouble as it points out the weak spots in what is already in play or in action so that you can go back, fix it, or rework it. Anything, I always call a Mercury retrograde the time of the re-re's. If you can take a word and put re in front of it, it's probably a good bet that it's going to show up in your life. That means reevaluate, rethink, re-talk, revision, re-imagine. And
so you're not referring.
So on.
You're not referring to Jerry's kids. You're referring to the reing of anything.
The reing, the reing. That's kind of an interesting way to put it, but yes. Yeah. So whatever the issues are in the sign that it happens to be retrograding in, are where we're going to find the re-re's, right? So. When we're dealing with Capricorn energy, of course, we're dealing with Saturn stuff. So we have a sort of synergistic thing going on between Saturn, the planet of duty and responsibility and limitation and form and structure, and Mercury, the winged messenger who rules things like transportation, the mind, and communication. And in a sign that Saturn rules, which means that Saturn is probably hands down going to win this little argument between these two planets over the next couple of weeks. So I might as well just tell everybody right now, whatever you think is going to happen or whatever you think it is that you should say, button your lip and wait to see what might be the right thing to say over time and with clarity and with a cooler head and with an emotional level that's dialed down and dialed back. Because otherwise, you're dealing with a Mercury going retrograde just before Christmas. And what happens? What was that saying that you gave us a couple of weeks ago that Shirley MacLaine said about holidays?
Yeah,
right? You're all enlightened until you sit down with your family.
On Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
So, I have to tell you that Mercury, for me, and my interest in astrology was paramount because, unlike you, where you had, a metaphysical. Have you ever done a show, by the way, telling people how you came to astrology?
I'm not sure. It's on my website, but I'm not sure that I've ever. I know I've mentioned it at various times.
Okay. Well, you see, astrology didn't come to me like that. I had to come through the Capricorn Saturn hard knock school. The first ever, how you begin to notice patterns, and you're like, oh, this is the pattern. Oh, this is the pattern. Mercury was the only planet that time and time again would screw me. No kissing, no hugging, no tenderness. And it was because of Mercury constantly messing with money for me, or constantly messing with job situation, or, God forbid, all that bullshit that they talk about, oh, don't buy any major electronic appliances, or don't get a car, or don't get... Every single time, don't sign a contract during it. Every single time I've either done the apartment thing, and I had to sign during Mercury Retrograde, or for a car, or what the fuck? It's like, this is a joke. And I got so frustrated that I said, there's got to be some relevance to these idiots running around saying Mercury Retrograde, Mercury Retrograde. And you're like, son of a bitch. No, I mean it. You're like, son of a bitch, this is real. And that was my intro.
Right.
That and Elizabeth Hayek. So I was hoping that you would let me try and explain from a layman idiot what a Mercury retrograde is, and then you can correct me, and hopefully everybody will be like, oh.
Sure, go right ahead, but don't get upset when I jump in and correct you, because you might have the
slightest. I love being submissive to you. It's sexy for me. Okay, so
we're already getting out of control, Jason.
We get the sun, which has its gravitational pull on all the planets. This little planet by the name of Mercury is going around doing its thing, and then a larger body from the outside of it comes by it, holding it in place until the large body passes and then releases it. And that being held in place thing is called a retrograde. Is that incorrect?
You are very darn close. Essentially, it is when the faster planet, i.e. Mercury, gets ahead of the Earth or gets ahead of the sun, and appears from our position here on Earth to be standing still or even moving backwards through the sky. Of course, it is not moving backwards, but instead of it keeping a pace with the sun or moving ahead of the sun as is usual, it is sort of backing its way into the sun again and then gets behind the sun, then turns back to forward motion, catches back up with the sun, passes it, and then eventually comes back to a point where it's retrograde again. So it has this little dance that it's doing. It is never actually moving backwards. No planet is ever turning around and headed backwards through the sky. It just appears that way because of its faster orbit than the other bodies involved. So, for example, it takes only 88 days for Mercury to go completely around the sun, where it takes the Earth 365 days. So if you look at the proportion or the ratio from the number of days, 88, to the number of days, 365, you can see that there's probably going to be 3 to 4 times that Mercury is going to pass the Earth in the midst of the one time that the Earth goes around the sun. Does that make sense?
Oh, my God. Sometimes you melt my brain. Yes, but that's a lot to take in. So I don't know if I could repeat
This is
that
why
back,
you don't need
yes.
to take it in. You just need to listen to astrologers and what do astrologers say about Mercury retrograde. Now, so let's go back to the beginning here. Mercury retrograde is not a bad thing, but it has a bad rap because there are things you can imagine when we are moving forward with a project, right, that we kind of get a blind spot about where maybe some of the weak spots are. Like, for example, let's say we're building a house and we're looking at the plans, but somehow the builder forgot to put something in the plan. And we just go building, 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 and then we suddenly go, but wait a minute, this isn't going to work. So now I have to go backwards, right? I have to go backwards and I have to reevaluate where I am, look at the plan a little bit differently, decide what had been left out, fill in that gap, and then go forward again. So that little dance that we say, moving 2 steps forward and 1 step back is really what the retrograde process is all about. You're still a step ahead, but sometimes you have to go backwards and pick up something that you missed or pick up something that got forgotten by someone else. So wisdom here is that you never begin anything new under a retrograde. And, right now we've just entered the shadow of the retrograde. Today is the day, December 1st, is the first day of the shadow of Mercury retrograde. And what does that mean? It means that this is the degree at which Saturn will retrograde all the way to once we get done with the retrograde. So today Mercury is at 28 degrees Sagittarius. And that is where the retrograde period will end, is at 28 degrees Sagittarius. So you're entering the shadow period of the territory that Mercury will go back over during its station. So what we say then is that as we enter the shadow period, this 3 weeks leading up to the retrograde itself is usually the part where it's really wonky. This is the part where things are going to get miscommunicated. If there's going to be a part where or if there's going to be a point at time in which things are going to fall apart, it's going to be these 3 weeks that it's in retrograde motion.
Repeat to me when the shadow period begins. Today,
December 1st. And so we are now in the shadow period from December 1st through the 19th of December. On December 20th, it will turn retrograde at 15 degrees of Capricorn. And it will move direct again on January 9th at 28 degrees Sagittarius. And then, of course, like all of the planets, there's an entry into the retrograde, then the retrograde, and then there's the passing of the planet back over all the territory it retrograded through. And that's the final 3-week period, which will be from January 10th through January 27th. That will complete our entire Mercury retrograde cycle. So we have an extended period of time with some wonkiness. And so it bears looking at then, where is this going to happen in someone's chart? Because that's where, if anything, there is going to be problems or the potential for problems, because not everybody has problems.
I was going to ask you, when Mercury is retrograde in a specific sign, does it really screw that particular sign? Like, I was kind of freaked out because I'm like, I'm not crazy about Mercury to begin with, but it's retrograding in Capricorn with the whole Saturn thing. Do Capricorns are we gonna feel it more than you get my drift?
Than Aquarians or any other sign?
Yeah.
That depends on your chart because, for example, I know you're going to feel it because your sun sits at 13 degrees of Capricorn. So Mercury is passing right over that sun of yours twice, 3 times, right? It's going to head forward over it, then it's going to head backwards over it, and then later on it's going to go forward back over the same spot. So you, my friend, are going to get hit at your sun 3 different times. Where someone like me, I don't have anything. Well, I can't say that I don't have anything in Capricorn, but I don't have anything in these degrees of Capricorn. So I'm not necessarily going to be hit as much, even though I'm a Gemini and Mercury's my ruling planet. I won't have as much because I don't have planets sitting there, and I don't have much going on in relationship to it here. That doesn't mean I'm off the hook. It just means I'm not under the gun like you might be, or someone who has planets that sit there.
Thanks for that vote of confidence. I don't feel very encouraged. Like I want to stick my head in the sand for the next 3 weeks.
No, don't you dare. You can't. So let's talk about some of the things that Mercury retrograde can mean in Capricorn, and maybe that'll help soothe your little soul. So remember I said that, we're often looking at the re-re's when we're talking about a retrograde where we're going to redo things, right? So when we're talking about Capricorn energy and its rulership of by Saturn, we're talking about plans and ideas and how do we put plans in motion. So one word that I would use here is going to be about reevaluation. And you can also look at this through the retrogrades. There's an in-breath, and then there's the out-breath. You could look at the inward breath as the retrograde itself. And it brings all the energy inward into the body or inward into the soul or inward into the more introspective self. On the out-breath, after it moves back to a forward motion, then you have all of this energy of the action that can take place in the outer world. And so we have the plans and the ideas and things that we wanted to put into action, we put in action at that point in time. So if you are evaluating your goals, then you have an opportunity during the retrograde to find perhaps where there are holes in the plan, where the idea isn't sound, where maybe you didn't focus your energy in the way that would make this a plan that was worthwhile. So that's one way that it could come out. Another thing that can happen is that this planet is about refining your goals. Refining your goals as in, let's say you have a plan, goals, you have aspirations, and those goals and aspirations may be too big in scope. Maybe you haven't refined it to a point where it makes sense for something, where it could actually work. And so you want to take the time to refine your goals and so forth. So then another word we can use is realignment, because the sign of Capricorn ruled by Saturn is really about claiming your authority and your authenticity, or at least that's one facet of this. And so if we have gotten out of alignment with who we are or with the message that we're here to share or out of alignment with our life purpose, then we have this opportunity during this period of time to realign ourselves with those goals or to realign ourselves with our authority and our true self. Let's put it in that way, because this is about being in alignment with the truth of who you are. And then perhaps the biggest word of all in this entire period of time is going to be about integrity. And the integrity, when I use the word integrity, I'm talking about being true to oneself. The word integrity comes from the root word for integument, the skin. And how isn't that, of course, it's kind of interesting that Mercury is in Capricorn and Saturn is the ruling planet, and it rules the skin and the bones. So we have this idea of having to be true to ourselves, to stay within our own skin, and, kind of to tend your own garden and your own backyard instead of getting immersed in everything that is everybody else's business. I think it's, what is her name? I just lost her name, that she says there's my business, there's God's business, and then there's your business. So it's about us staying in our own business and keeping to our own codes and doing what's right for us. And that's a big theme. And it's not only a theme just for this period of time. It takes off into the new year as well. So this will be an interesting word for us to play with, or an interesting concept for us to play with as we end 2016 and look forward to moving into 2017. Now, during this Mercury retrograde, we also have it kind of coming right up to the planet Pluto, which is sitting at 15 degrees Capricorn, and kind of conjuncting that planet for a very short moment and then going backward. So the planet Pluto represents transformation on a very big scale. And it is also sometimes that planet that drags us into the underworld so that we could see from the underbelly and then come back up to the surface where we can then affect change in a more appropriate way. So with Mercury coming up to sort of just kiss Pluto backwards back away from Pluto, we can get an opportunity during this time to take a look at what needs transforming in our lives. So wherever you have 15 degrees of Capricorn right now, you still have a planet sitting there. It's a transiting planet for sure, but it is affecting some form of change in your life. So for example, if you had Pluto sitting right now in the 5th house, which is the joy, creativity, fun, play, taking risks house, and Mercury comes up to greet it, you may come face to face with how you have to transform your life to be more creative, to incorporate more fun, to be more open to connecting with the energy of that childlike enthusiasm of life in general. So we have lots of opportunities at this point in time for us to take a look deeper at who we are, where we're going, what we're doing, to get straight with ourselves or to get right with ourselves. And, there's one other thing that's really interesting about this time period, and I don't know where I was, probably something on Facebook, I think I was on CNN, and they were talking about the fact that the U.S. election certifies on December 19th, which happens to be the last day before the planet goes retrograde. And often Mercury retrograde brings about a reversal of sorts. And I just have to wonder, in the face of these recounts going on in states like Wisconsin and I think it was Pennsylvania and I can't remember the other one, Michigan perhaps, that what kind of reversal is perhaps in the offing because Mercury retrogrades at that point in time. So it's kind of fascinating to think about and look at the possibility of that. Well, that would be a pretty in-your-face, big-time Mercury reversal, and I'm not putting all my hopes and eggs in that basket, but I would bet you there's something there that gets exposed to us or that comes to light during this period of time that we didn't know about, whether it is the truth of something hacking the voting system, whether it is, in fact, that the Electoral College was somehow rigged in favor of Trump, even though Hillary was the one with the greater number of votes for the popular vote. I don't know what it will be, but you can bet that whatever people want hidden during a Mercury retrograde doesn't stay hidden for long. And because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and is called Lord Karma, I can expect that something interesting ought to be coming up from that period of time. Well, I don't know specifics. Yeah. I don't even want to venture to guess. But it is interesting that this is what's happening at this point in time, given the contentiousness of the election and the sort of shocking way that it ended, and perhaps something being revealed as to why that would have been. And then, of course, that leads us to what do we do with that? How do we remedy the situation? How do we take it all and become more in integrity with our democracy? And so big questions, not ones that I really want to answer specifically as an astrologer, but it will be interesting to see how that plays out on the big stage, on the world stage, because, by the way, guys, Mercury isn't turning retrograde just for us here in the U.S. I mean, it's happening for everybody on the planet. So it's not only our politics, it's the politics of the world, the economies of the world. So there's a lot at stake when planets do these little dances. So watch for news from around the world as to what's taking off and what's being reversed and that kind of thing. So kind of fun times we have to look forward to in the next few weeks, actually.
I could launch into a whole political thing. It's bad enough that I can't even. So I wanted to know, is there anything else retrograding with Mercury at the same time?
Well, there's always planets in Mercury, or always planets in retrograde. It's not ever just Mercury. It's just Mercury is the planet that we hear about more often because it changes direction frequently. A planet like Saturn that might be retrograde 4 to 5 months out of the year, you're not going to hear so much about because it's retrograde for a good chunk of the year, and then that's it, right? But
Gotcha.
Mercury's inner So it's going to do this dance quite frequently, as is befitting the messenger god, right? The messenger planet. In a way, you could look at him as sort of the ferryman, fairy woman of information from our inner self to our outer self, from our outer selves back to our inner selves. And you know how in human design we talk about the generators and the manifesting generators and how they grow on a stair-step kind of trajectory where there's a lot of growth and then they come to a plateau, and it's on that plateau where they are sort of integrating all of the growth that's occurred on the stair-step up. Well, Mercury's doing that same thing, because otherwise we just go and we go and we go without ever having a mechanism by which we have to integrate everything that's happened in the outer world to us over the intervening months and weeks. So I think without Mercury going retrograde, I think we'd all be crazy, right? I think Mercury pulls us up short, makes us stop and reevaluate, reimagine, redefine, refine, reevaluate, look at our authority, our authentic selves, and realign ourselves if we're out of that. I'm purposely using the re's in front of all these words because it works perfectly to describe what we're headed for.
Wunderbar.
Yeah. So why don't we take a caller or two, and then I want to go talk to or speak to human design and what some of the energies are that we can see that Mercury hits through human design over the next couple of months.
Awesome. I'd like to bring Patricia in for you because she's interested in asking you a few questions. Patricia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Janet. I had emailed you with my information. I'm
got
the
it
one
sitting
with
right
the. Yeah, I've got all those planets in Capricorn. And my moon in Mercury retrograde.
Yes. Yep. But guess what? They're at 24 and 25 degrees, or 24 and 26 degrees. I can't tell. It's too dark in my room here. So they're not going to be affected by this retrograde. So you're in the clear here for a bit, because Mercury is only getting up to 15 degrees of Capricorn, and then it will retrograde back to 28 degrees of Sagittarius. So you're really not going to get hit with a Mercury retrograde in your fifth house here. You're going to get hit much more into January as Mercury passes through that part of the chart. So you don't have to worry about the retrograde here. But here's another interesting thing about Mercury retrograde. For you, Patricia, Mercury was retrograde when you were born. And that's the same thing in my own chart. I have Mercury retrograde by birth. So for me, and this is probably the same for you, it's always worse for me in the time just before the retrograde and just after the retrograde. The whole entire retrograde is a total non-event for me. It feels very smooth, and with the rare exception of something that comes up, the retrograde itself is a very good time for me. My mind seems clearer. My mouth and my mind line up and work in tandem for once, and I don't seem to have problems. And that's going to be kind of the same motif for you. Those 3 weeks of the retrograde period from December 20th until January 9th should be very good times for you. And that will happen actually in your fourth house of home and family and traditions. So it makes for some happy holidays, I think, for you, or hopefully what can be smooth conversation with those people in your family. But of course, I don't know their chart, so I don't know, which of your family members may be affected by the Mercury retrograde, and if they're unconscious about it, what might happen, from their standpoint. But from your
standpoint, it's not going to affect me because I don't deal with them on the holidays anyway. I've learned my
probably
lesson.
A smart move.
Yes.
So in reality, the hotbed for you right now is that fourth house, because that's where the sun is headed, that's where Saturn is, that's where the moon is today, that's where Mercury is right now and during this retrograde for you. So what's going on with you at home, with your mother, with your job or your profession, that kind of thing? That's what's interesting me in your chart.
Well, I don't know. I'm really tired of my job, and I'm tired. I'm getting ready to put this house to rest. I really need to move on to another neighborhood and to another job, and so it's entering my mind on different things that I can do, and I don't know when to proceed and make things happen. It feels like I'm kind of being blocked.
I would not do that until at least after the 27th or so of January, just to get clear of the entire Mercury retrograde cycle. And, property and things like that in January anyway is a tough time, to try to sell, because there's not, I don't know where you live. I see where you were born. Are you in New Mexico still?
Yes.
So you probably have less rain and so forth than we do up here in the Pacific Northwest during this time of year. But, people are not always in the mood to buy a house right after the holidays. They've just spent a good deal of money probably around the Christmas time. And so I'm looking at maybe February, early March being a good time for you to start looking at the real estate market. Maybe do the things that you can internally in your house right now to prepare for that. And then look at what you can do on the outer part of the house as you get closer into February and March. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one question I had is that I had done some caulking in my home because I was caulking a little tiny crack in the wall. And I had done that originally not in a Mercury retrograde, and then I was told that you can go and redo things on a Mercury retrograde. Well, I did that on a Mercury retrograde, and it came out worse than I originally had. And so now I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, what do I do? It's totally worse than. So you're saying that we can redo things on a Mercury retrograde?
Yeah, however, I wouldn't redo something like that on a Mercury retrograde simply because of this. You've already tried it and it blew up in your face. So don't do it again.
Yeah.
Learn the lesson. Get somebody else to come in and do it. Hire somebody this time to come in and make that change for you. So let's go back to that, because you bring up a good point about, being able to redo things. You only redo something if it shows up in your outer world as something that's potentially solvable by looking at it in a new way, right? So you don't suddenly decide that because 6 months ago you caulked the bathroom, and I'm not saying that this is what you did, that you're going to redo it now, right? Because there's too much time intervening. But if there was a contract that you were looking at to sign earlier in the let's say 6 weeks prior to this time, then you may be able to spot the inconsistencies in that contract now. You may be able to spot the places where you were being fooled by what they were saying. And in that respect, then you can go back to them and say, it's time to redo this contract. You left this out, you forgot this, and this is the wrong wording, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to be very careful still about what you redo or reimagine and rework during this period of time. You don't want to take something that was done a year ago and, because that's almost like a rebirth then. That's almost like a restarting of something. And I would be very careful about that, especially in a sign that's structural like Capricorn, because Capricorn does rule structure and form. And, who wants to ruin the whole entire bathroom, everything because you did something under a retrograde? It could cost you more money in the end. So
I didn't do it because it was a retrograde, but I just did it, and I was like, oh, well, it's okay to do it. I needed to do it, and it was a retrograde, and I was like, okay, I can go ahead and do it, but it came out worse. It's not so bad. I mean, I can fix it. It's just now I see how I can fix it. So, it's coming to light. But I just had a question over that. And so you're saying that since I was born under a retrograde Mercury, it doesn't affect the people as much when they're born under a retrograde?
Yeah, if Mercury, just Mercury, and any of the other planets we can talk about too, but it looks like Mercury is the main one here that we're talking about today, in your case especially. If Mercury is retrograde when you were born, then the retrograde period itself can tend to be much easier for you than it is for everybody else. You might have issues before the Mercury retrograde and just after, but the retrograde itself is easier. And of course, again, that depends. Like let's just push Mercury retrograde into the 25 degrees of Capricorn, where your sun or where your moon and your natal Mercury is. Then there might be some other issues because you've got planetary interference there. But in your case, that's not what's happening with this retrograde. You have no planetary interference, nothing even by opposition, nor squaring it, actually. So you're in pretty good shape as far as this particular retrograde time. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have issues because other people around you aren't going to be in that same condition. And, of course, we're all in this together. And so
we're held
you could
to
be
the same rules, basically.
Same rules.
Okay.
Yeah, same rules, but you might your experience may be that the time of the retrograde itself is technically easier for you. Okay. You know, that's a good time to focus more energy on. If it were me and I had Mercury retrograde where you do, what I would be doing is working a plan during this period of time. I would be saying, I would be doing all the research that I needed to do about getting my house ready for sale. I might even go through the house room by room, looking at what needs to be done. I might go outside, and the whole idea is I'm building a plan here as to what I'm going to do to get my house ready to sell. And that would be perfectly favorable for you to do.
Okay.
Right, because it's your Capricorn energy there. It's appropriate for that time of year to be looking at goals and plans and that type of thing. And of course, I could also use the words renovation, remodeling, in as it regards your house, and what might need to be done in order to get it ready for selling.
You're
so,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, as far as when your house sells, my guess is before December of next year, if that's indeed what you want to do. Because that's when Saturn itself will be moving out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn, and my hope would be that you were into a new house at that point in time and be building a new foundation in a new place. That makes sense to you?
After December of this year?
Yeah, next year.
Oh,
Between
after
December of this year. Yeah, after December of next year, Saturn moves into Capricorn. So my guess is this is all said and done between now and next December for sure, in order to be able to build a new foundation for yourself in a new place.
Okay. And I do know my moon's in Capricorn. Just one last question. Is there a reason why I feel just so magical when the moon hits my natal moon? I don't know. December's, I know it's cold and everything, but I feel like I'm in another world. It just feels so wonderful. Is there a reason for that?
When the moon hits your natal moon or when the sun hits your natal moon?
Both. I just feel, because I notice that when the moon crosses Capricorn, I notice that I just feel different. I feel good.
I think, so every month, of course, this is going to happen, where the moon is going to cross your natal moon. And that does that for everybody. It just happens to be that it's going to happen for you toward the end of the sign of Capricorn. And so what it does is it sets off, because the moon runs the cycles of time, and so it may set off an emotional well-being or an emotional flow of good energy. And that may be why you experience that, when the moon hits it. Now, the sun is going to hit it once a year, and it's going to be the same thing. It's going to set off a tide of ego energy, of outer world circumstances that feel good because you're in the fifth house at that point in time. And maybe your usual restraint and circumspectness get untied at that point in time, and you're more open and outgoing and more amenable to some of the more lighthearted energies coming in. So
yeah, I notice that does happen. Is that common?
Exactly. For me, for example, I have almost a perfect Star of David in my chart, and every month that Star of David is triggered when the moon comes to 8 degrees of Capricorn, or when the sun once a year comes to 8 degrees of Capricorn. It forms that perfect Star of David, and things seem to kind of unfold in very easy ways for me and in magical ways. So, that happens for everybody somewhere in their chart and in more than one place in their chart often. So it's expected, and I would say it happens to you. You're probably going to have a longer-term period of that coming up, as Pluto will be hitting that range in the next year or two. So expect good times are rolling.
Oh, good. So I don't have to fear Pluto. I was fearing Pluto. I was like, oh, no, Pluto.
Well, I got to tell you, I sat down today, and I had a really good cry this morning because I was reading a book called Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas. And it's a book that's really about some of the larger cycles of time. And I was looking into information around why it is our world is so unbelievably crazy at the moment. And what I was reading was making me very sad in that, there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction coming up in 2020, and that's a time of constriction and more conservatism, and I've already had enough of conservatism with just this election. And so I got really, sad about these cycles. But these cycles happen for all of us, and they bring us around to the opportunities that we can, if we bring in our focus and we look at things in a different way, then we can move outward again in the world in a different way. So I don't want you to fear a planet ever. It's more like, what do you choose to do with that energy instead of being the victim of what's going on? How do you choose to use it for your benefit and for the benefit of the people in your life?
Okay, so not to fear Pluto coming in. You're saying it's going to be a good situation for me.
I think it would be a transformationally good time for you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Janet.
You're most welcome.
Appreciate
thank you
your
so much.
reading. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
So Janet,
let's see. Yeah.
You have a lot of people in the queue, and I have one more question. Do you want to do more educational, or you want to do more reading?
Well, let's do some readings. We got about 17, 18 minutes left. So let's bring in Marilyn.
All righty, let's bring her in. I will do that as we speak.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi.
Marilyn.
How are you, Jenny? Yes. Can you hear me?
How are you doing? Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for taking my call. So I sent you my birth details earlier, and similar to the earlier caller, I do have my moon in Capricorn. I'm not sure at what degree. And and also I'm going through a period of transformation with regards to my work, with regards to my family. It's been a little bit of a, hang on for the ride kind of feeling, and I'm wondering what you might see in there. Is there sort of some tranquility ahead?
Would you be upset if I said no? or let me rephrase that. You may have to find moments where you can create your own tranquility, because it's not just there in the cards, as I see it right now. And so one of the things that I would say here is that let's look first at your career. And what's happening for you right now is that Destiny, the North Node, which looks like a little horseshoe, is transiting past your midheaven. And so it's been, and it backs through the whole of the zodiac. So it enters in at 30 degrees of Virgo, which is the sign it's in right now, and then counts down to 0. And then moves into 29 degrees Leo, and then counts down to 0. So it has a different route it takes through the zodiac. So it's coming toward the end of its transit through Virgo, which means it's coming to your midheaven. The most sensitive point in the whole of the chart for what you do out in the outer world is that midheaven. And so as the destiny point transits over that, it means it's been in your 10th house. It's already been having you look at, what is it going to take to make me feel whole? What's it going to take to make me feel connected to something that I'm doing in my life? And I think you're coming close to the aha of what that means for you here within the next 3 to 6 months. So I have real hope for you in that arena, that's going to take place. Now, On the opposite side of that is the fourth house of home and family and traditions, and it's sort of the foundational place where you form security and stability. And you have, unfortunately, Chiron moving through that part. And Chiron is often a wounded aspect of ourselves. And it's transiting through a place right now where you may be having to deal with family members, perhaps, or close-knit friends who have some issues and that you're having to work through some healing issues with. Is that true?
Yeah.
Are you having something like that going on?
Absolutely true. Both my husband and a good friend. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I see then what you're looking at here then is having faith that everything is going to be okay, but more than that, there's compassion. And compassion is a two-way street. As you're offering compassion to others, you must also offer compassion to yourself. And there are times that you just have to back out of the fray, and you have to say, this isn't my problem. What's that saying? Not my circus, not my monkey, that kind of thing. And if it's not your if it's not your circus, not your monkey, then it means that you can pull back. It doesn't mean you don't have compassion for people or for your loved ones. It just means that you're not going to, you don't have to solve their problems. Hallelujah. Right? Because they're not technically yours. So I see that's happening. I think there's probably, let's see if we can get into this one really quickly. I know we're already dwindling in minutes. I swear our time flies when you're having fun. We are set up. We all are set up. So anybody who's listening can take this information in as well. That we are set up here in December in the midst of this Mercury retrograde for a Jupiter-Uranus opposition. Remember, Jupiter is about growth and expansion and is in the Libra part of our charts, which are about relationships and so forth. At the other end, Uranus is transiting through Aries, a sign of conflict and confrontation at times, but also taking bold action and moving forward sort of fearlessly. And so, and Uranus is the revolutionary in our charts. So we have this energy of revolution and growth together. So what does that mean? And where is it in your chart? Well, it's happening for you across the house of dreams and wishes and creativity, joy, and expression of those energies. So for you right now, the focus must become that of what you want to do with your life, who you want to be in the world. And what do I want to create? Right? And from that, then you'll find peace because you're not focused on the problems. You're focused on what do I want? What do I desire? What do I want to create? All right?
Okay. So
Marilyn,
finances as well. No, I'm still
finances. Here. Yeah, it just went quiet for a second. So finances are an interesting place in your chart because by birth you have natal Chiron, natal Mars, and natal Moon in Capricorn in your second house of earned income. And they are opposed by Uranus in Cancer in the 8th house. Which is other people's money or credit and debt and things that are out of your control. Kind of spouse's income falls into that place. And coming through the second house here in the very near future is the planet Saturn. And you've already got Pluto sitting in that second house and Venus right now and Mercury going retrograde in that house. So it feels to me like, Marilyn, you're going to have to get some clarity on money. Maybe there are places, instead of just having to earn more money, perhaps there's a way that you can also get to a point where you can limit your spending in some way or, not out of fear. I don't want you doing any of this out of fear because it's not about fear.
Right.
This is just about realigning your finances, right, so that you can free up some resources and so that you can be primed, let's say, for the opportunities that are coming to you in the very near future. So not a bad thing. So, and here's another point that I'd like to make for everybody listening, is that you are designed, in human design, you are here with abundance. You did not come into this planet lacking anything. And it's only through conditioning and the different people that we come in contact with that we lose our connection to that idea of being abundant or being abundant. Does that make sense so far?
Right.
Okay, so if we keep our minds focused on the what is it I want, what am I creating, who do I want to do that with, where do I want to do it, that kind of thing, then we're not so much into the I need to figure out how I can fix this, because that triggers our mind, and in our mind we create more fear. Right? So get out of that point. Just get into what do I want to create from here? Right? That's the important thing for you. If there's any message you take from me today, what do I want to create financially, from my career, in my relationships, in my family, because that's where all the juice is for you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jen. Okay.
Now, can I say one more thing before you go off the line, because this is important? Mercury is going to retrograde over your natal Mars. So I want you to be, can I say this without you getting fearful? I want you to stay conscious. Yeah. Try not to get into any unconsciousness. So I hear you driving, or I think you're driving. Are you on the road right now talking?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Over the next few weeks, please don't do that, because you're going to need all of your focus. When Mars and Mercury in retrograde get together, there could be accidents, because we have tendency to get into what I call road hypnotism, or we can lose consciousness temporarily, kind of thing. Not like you're literally going unconscious, but if you're not aware of your surroundings at all times, problems can occur. So please stay very conscious for me, at least through I'm going to throw out a date of January 15th or so. All right?
Okay.
Conscious.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. Take care. Marilyn, thanks so much for calling today. Okay. All right, so I think
we have a couple of minutes, and yes, some people have dropped off. I think I've been having in the background all kinds of computery internet glitches. So welcome to that phase you discussed, that shadow thingy.
Yeah, the shadow, the fun part of the whole retrograde cycle.
Listen, before we finish up today, can you tell me what energies does Mercury bring up in the human design thing?
Right, is that, in human design, I love going to human design because it gives us an in to what some of the more technical, let's say, traits are that might be triggered during this period of time. So the first thing that comes up is that today is the last day that Mercury is at gate 11, which is the gate of ideas and the things that we want to share with others and the things that we want to take action on ourselves. Then, starting tomorrow, it moves into gate 10. So for the next 5 days after that, next 4 or 5 days, then we have Mercury in a place of either empowering through words or disempowering through words. It's not just me, other people call this the verbal gunslinging gate of the energy, because sometimes we get into verbal battles with people. And so I would urge everybody with Mercury coming into its, slowing phase to watch your words, make sure you say what you mean and mean what you say. Maybe stop and pause before you actually blurt out anything that might be hurtful or harmful to others. Because for these first 5 days, that's, the energy that we're dealing with. Now, after that, once we get into December 6th through the 9th, we are dealing with the energy of joy. So I'm going to say go out and express joy and have fun, but also beware that, sometimes you can take fun too far, right? It's fun to go out and have a drink with friends on a Friday night, but we can get a little bit too tipsy and then drive, and that can be a big problem. So we want to be very careful about how we express joy too, but go out and express joy, because following that, Mercury really begins its slowdown, and it spends much more time, in fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days at gate 38, which is the gate of the fight. And so that's taking us right up to the holiday, right? That takes us up to December 18th. And yes, and the gate of the energy of the fight is, picking your battles, choosing the battle that makes sense.
Well,
and if it's not a sense, if it doesn't make sense, walk away, right? If it's not.
Don't you find it interesting that this is happening during the holidays?
Yes. I do.
Yeah.
But what I find more fascinating is remember that Mercury is sort of the messenger. It's either preceding the sun or it is lagging behind the sun. So it's either batting cleanup where the sun has already been, or it's laying the groundwork for where the sun will be. So right now, because we're not into the retrograde yet, it is laying the groundwork for where the sun will be. So,
gotcha.
Right? So we want to take notice about the energies that are building right now, because the sun follows into gate 11 on the 14th of December, and then into gate 10 on the 20th of December, and then into the gate of joy on Christmas Day, which is appropriate, I think, and into the gate of the fight on New Year's Eve. So it bears watching what's going on with Mercury, because it means the sun is coming behind that and will shed more light on how that's going to play out. So those are the energies. And then I think you were talking with another person at the time I was mentioning that Mercury is going to come up to Pluto, give it a little kiss, and then turn around backwards, right, and go backwards into, right? So it actually makes it to the gate of enlightenment, or where enlightenment begins, which is where Pluto is sitting right now, the gate of ambition and drive. It makes it up to that gate for one day and then turns around and goes backwards. So I think what this prime message for this Mercury retrograde might be is that if we are seeking enlightenment, there may be these intervening things in our lives that we need to work with in order to get clear, right? To get right, to get square, if you will.
Gotcha.
And then once Mercury begins its movement forward, and now we're into 2017, we will have again. Let's see if I can pinpoint the date. It'll be Mercury. It'll be January 28th. When Mercury comes to gate 54 again, and we'll see the fruits of the things that we worked on for ourselves over these previous weeks and days. So we've got a lot to work on, all of us, right? We do. We might have some things that are unexpected happening over the next couple of weeks. And watch for verbal sparring. It's never a win-win situation if we do that, and we can really wreck our relationships with others if we insist on saying the first things that come into our minds. So unless it's loving and kind and peaceful and generous, then for sure say it. But
the blue-eyed goddess, do me a favor, because we only have like a minute or two left. Will you tell everybody where they can reach you to get an in-depth astrological reading as well as human design coaching, and where they can go to for your free charts?
That will all be at my website, www.living-astrology.com. And watch that site, because in the next couple of days I will be adding the free Mercury Retrograde chart for people. I take it off during the time Mercury is not retrograde, and I will be putting it back up there because everybody's going to want to know that. And I often will send a little mini reading along with that chart so that you have an idea of what it means to have Mercury going retrograde in your first house in Capricorn or in whatever house it is. So that'll be right on the homepage. You can also follow along with the different things that we post about your show, Titillating Tarot with Jason Levanis and Living Astrology, on the Living Astrology Facebook page. So go there. And
very exciting
Jason,
stuff. So I have a quick question for you before we end up. I want to be specific for a second. You didn't exactly tell me. You told me where Capricorn was, but you didn't tell me, like, warning, like the rest of the people. Like, what should I be on the lookout for, given where Capricorn, who I am?
Well, for the moment, I don't remember where Capricorn is in your chart. Do you remember what your rising sign is?
Pisces.
Because Pisces is your rising sign, so Capricorn is going to be somewhere back at the 10th house, perhaps. So a change, perhaps, in direction around what you do out there in the world.
All right.
I would, make sure things that you watch your website work, right? Website and Facebook stuff. When you work on your website during Mercury retrograde, things disappear. That's not fun to do all that work and have stuff disappear. So back up.
It's funny because I I have a temporary website up right now that I'm tweaking and trying to make alterations to, and so it's I feel kind of like I get a free pass.
Frequently.
Okay.
Save frequently. All right.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
So from all of us here at Living Astrology and Titillating Tarot, have a great evening. Thank you for tuning in today, and have a stellar week.
Bye now.
Bye, Jason. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me today on Living Astrology. Living Astrology is part of the Empower You Media Network. You can find out more by going to www.living-astrology.com or by going to www.empoweryoumedia.com. If you would like to find out when our shows are airing, you can follow us at Blog Talk Radio under Living Astrology. Please consider liking us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Living Astrology and also Empower You Media. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now. Have a stellar week.